I'm Lisa Gable, and I have had amazing opportunities. At the age of 19, I went to work for the Reagan administration, and I worked at the White House and the Pentagon. At the age of 24, I was recruited to Intel Corporation by the man who had become CEO and chairman. At the age of 30, I had the honorary rank of a 3-star general. When I was vice chair of a Department of Defense commission, helping women become better integrated into the military and giving them more opportunities. And at the age of 40, I became a U.S. ambassador. However, today, I'm tasked with solving a very complex problem: food allergies, something that affects 85 million Americans and 500 million people around the world. What I learned from Ingenuity is to always demand unity of purpose. What I learned from former Air Force Secretary Barbara Barrett is always replace yourself with another woman when you're going out of a high-level position. Because women helping women is how we're going to solve the tough problems, whether it's giving voice to our food allergy moms or mentoring our rising leaders. And that's the purpose of this inspiring interview series. Resilience, diligence, optimism, those are the defining characteristics of the women I'm going to introduce you to. So welcome to Breakthrough. Today's episode is about optimism. Joining me is a woman who's renowned for seeking out opportunities to solve complex problems and quickly expand the solution's impact. Sylvia Acevedo, former CEO of Girl Scouts of the USA, rocket scientist and corporate director, spreads her optimism and can-do spirit to young girls across the country. I've known Sylvia since we started on the Girl Scouts of the USA board together 15 years ago, and I consider her a dear friend. Sylvia, why don't you take a few minutes and introduce yourself to everybody?
Oh, great. Hey, thank you, Lisa. It's great to be on this. One of the ways you introduced me is, former CEO of Girl Scouts, rocket scientist, Stanford graduate alum, tech exec. But, there's also another way to introduce me. And that is, a kid who grew up in a family living paycheck to paycheck, was in a Spanish-speaking monolingual household. All my grandparents were from Mexico. And so, one of the things is like to help people get inspired, sometimes when they hear about all these accolades, White House commissioner, CEO, they don't realize that, you've been on that journey along with them. And that really is another way of thinking about it. So how did that kid from the dirt road become all those things? And I wrote a book, Path to the Stars, really targeted for youth to help them understand how to overcome some of life's challenges. And so, when I think about what I've gone through in terms of working at NASA as a rocket scientist, being a tech exec, being CEO of the Girl Scouts, serving on the White House, and as an education commissioner, I wrote that to inspire kids that, through persistence, creating opportunity, they really can have a life of their dreams.
Well, it's so important. And I think you really raise such an important point. And, it's something you and I understand in our relationship because I put myself through college and, my sister and I will talk about the fact of, how many 25 cents, yes, they were 25 cents back then, everybody, ramen noodle bags did we eat during our undergraduate, during our first years out of college. Michelle and I both have compared notes when toll roads required actual coins and you'd like drive into the toll road and you'd be like looking through your entire, center section of your car and trying to see whether or not you actually had enough to get through the toll. And I think it's such a critically important thing for girls to understand that so many of us worked our way up the ladder. You had a really interesting American story to share, and it's very exciting to have you on sharing that story today. One of the things that you did with Girl Scouts and what I loved about when you were CEO is you really focused on the importance of robotics and space and STEM. And you brought that home and you created an entire awareness that, like you, these girls could go big places. They could go into space someday, as we've just seen a couple of weeks ago. So, maybe you can tell us a little bit about why you chose that as your sort of key deliverable as CEO of Girl Scouts.
One of the things that was really great about Juliette Gordon Low when she founded Girl Scouts is it was really moving from the agricultural age to the industrial age. And as CEO, I found myself in a similar position, moving from the industrial age to the digital age. And Juliet Gordon-Low did a great job of getting girls the skills, the badges they needed to be really successful and make their mark. And I think that's one of the reasons, Girl Scouts is such an important American institution. But I realized to allow girls to make their mark in this century, it required them to have digital skills. They all had a digital device in their hands. But how do they move from being the user of technology to the creator, the inventor, and the designer? We're half of the world, but we're not reflected in that technology. And so that became a huge focus of mine. And I discovered that girls wanted that. Girls wanted to know how that they could be that developer of technology and not just the user of technology.
Well, I think it's exciting, and I can't wait, 20 years from now to us look back and, see what else is going on in space and all the exciting advancements, and see a Girl Scout as one of those people, because as you and I both know from our time with Girl Scouts, that so many famous women today, so many accomplished women started as Girl Scouts as you did, and came up through that track in so many different ways. And I just think that it's a wonderful story to get out there as part of Breakthrough. As we look at where we are right now, vaccines are rolling out. I know that you, like me, you're ready to help this country push forward. But so many young girls and young women have been stuck on Zoom. They can't see their friends. And I'm just wondering, what words of encouragement do you have for them? What would you suggest that they think about as they're planning their reemergence from the pandemic? Their moms are watching. So how do they help encourage their daughters as we're at the second year of being stuck in our houses and we just have to get a little bit farther?
First is really acknowledging what they've gone through is amazingly difficult and challenging. When you think about a child that's maybe 8 or 9 years old, and you think about, their awareness in life, probably 20 to 25% of their real awareness has been in the last year and a half and you realize that's a huge part of their life. Whereas an adult, it's actually, you just think, oh, it's just 1 year of 20 or 30 or 40 years. But for them, it's a big part of their life. The other thing is, remember, they're going quickly through all these developmental stages. Some of them are going through adolescence. And so the changes they're experiencing are really profound as well. And to do that, really just connecting through many people through a screen really robs them of that human connection. So what I really advise moms and kids is to, one, help you understand you have been going through something really tough. And there is hope and there is light. And for a lot of kids, they're really concerned that another bad thing will happen that will be as devastating as this experience has been. So helping them understand and put some context and framing is really important. And you, as an adult, might say, well, I didn't know how to get through this either. I kind of stumbled along. But you also realize it was a really rare and unique experience, and to help the children have that kind of context. Now, the other one, too, is really, this is so important for them to try different things and to be okay to fail. They've had a year and a half of going on Zoom. And if they don't want to experience something, turning the camera off, right? When you're in person, you don't have that. And so what you will see kids doing is wanting to go behind the screen again, right? And instead of really being a human being, they've been so focused learning through school, through a device, that they've been human doings and not human beings. And one of the great lessons that I learned in Girl Scouts was you never walk away from a cookie sale until you've heard no 3 times. But what that taught me was the importance of persistence and resilience. And so for a lot of kids and even adults, we're going to be trying things again. And we may not be really comfortable the first time, the second time, the third time. So it's so important to be persistent, resilient. If it doesn't work out the first time, that's okay. You can try again, modify, adapt. And as a parent, it's really important to not do something for your kid, allow them to try and to fail and let them know that that's okay, that you'll be there with them. And also as a parent, give yourself a beat. This has been a tough year. And realize, maybe not everything was perfect, but you did the best that you could do. And to have that kind of attitude with your kid is incredibly important.
I think it's so, you raised such a good point. And I posted about this during the last week because I spent last week with my daughter, who's a 22-year-old, just graduated from SMU, and she's a preschool teacher. And she was beating herself up. And I had just gotten off a phone conversation with one of our vendors who said, "Oh my God, the Zoom didn't work. I'm so sorry." And I think the number one message that I've been putting out there, and it sounds like you have too, is no one expects perfection. No one
Mhm.
expects perfection during this pandemic. And most importantly, is this isn't the world we wanted for you. So lean on us to help drive that process. This is not the world I wanted for my daughter during her first year out of college. It's not the world that I wanted for some of my young employees. This isn't how I wanted to onboard them. So we are giving them a lot of leeway, but helping them actually accept it and know that it's okay, that no one expects everything to be absolutely perfect. It's such an important message.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And to realize that maybe there's ways to accelerate or sprint through some of what was lost in this last year so that they get those experiences and, can understand them and appreciate them and realize that how you build human connection, takes time, takes effort. It isn't always perfect, but the way you do that is by reaching out, connecting, and really giving each other grace that it's not going to be perfect.
Yeah, that's so important. And it kind of leads me to one of the things I wanted to talk about today. You're an innovator in tech and management systems and thought leadership. And so I know one of the responses we've gotten from women who've followed some of the work I've done is they said, "We'd love to hear from your guests the top 2 or 3 tricks that you employ to command the room and ensure that your ideas are incorporated into people's thinking." So, as you just mentioned, they are going to start entering rooms again. They're going to feel a little odd about it because in some cases it's the first room they're entering with physical human beings, even though they started work during COVID. What 2 or 3 tricks do you employ? Like, what do you do to get yourself ready and solid and centered before you open your mouth?
So what I'd like to do is do a little homework. So what is the meeting going to be about, right? And think about what is your perspective? What is your narrative around that? And then figure out, how do you make it relevant? What is the point? And how do you make it relevant? And then what are some actions that you can take on that? And what I have found when I do that, it's really surprising because many times a lot of people enter a room and they accept a meeting and they've done no preparation. So you really stand out because you've done some preparation. You kind of have a narrative of what's important, why it's relevant, and what you can do about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are great points, and it's something for people to know. I always teach them speak with facts. It was something that my mentor told me as he said, speak with facts. And as you said, if they do that prep work, they're going to have some data points that other people in the room haven't thought about, and that gives them a level of credibility that they may not know that they really have when they walk in there. Another thing that I've just had a conversation about this 3 days ago, so it's a perfect time to talk to you, is transitions. You and I have done something which is unusual. We have transitioned across a variety of industries. We've been in and out of the world of philanthropy. And so when we talk about new tips and top tips, as you enter a new arena, I don't think one, people realize how transferable their skill sets are between industries and between activities. But when you do walk in, what's a top tip for how you enter a new space? How do you get to be taken seriously? What do you also say when people say, "Oh, you don't have the right background for that job"?
Well, you're right, Lisa. I think something you and I have in common is we've done a lot of different things. Yes, I've been a rocket scientist. I've been a tech exec. I've been in education, led a major nonprofit, and now on a corporate board. So what I have found is what is the skill that really distinguishes me. One is data, right, and then also kind of putting a story around the data. And I want to give a couple examples of one transition I did when I was in a for-profit and another one when I was in education. And I was working at a technology company in the domestic side, and I really wanted to get to the global side. And no matter what I did, I just couldn't break through. So again, data and analytics is kind of one of my superpowers. And so I did this analysis, and I really began borderline stalking the head of sales of that division. And I had prepared a presentation that showed that if the international division, just had the same kind of penetration in global accounts as I did in my region of the US, that they would have hundreds of millions of dollars more in sales. So I prepared the presentation, had it in PowerPoint, printed out, and I caught him and I said, look, I can show you how you could increase sales in the Pacific region by hundreds of millions of dollars with already existing customers. And he's like, okay, I'll give you 5. So we went into a team room, went through my presentation. He flipped through it and he's like, great, can I have it? And I put my hand on it. And I said, yes, you can have it, but it comes with me. So I finally was able to break through. And again, that was on data analytics kind of storytelling. And then when I had just went to work at Dell and was in Austin, had a successful exit from a technology company. And then I wanted to use my powers in education and healthcare. And, how, when you're working with educators, they're really good on one-on-one and one-on-few. But what I saw was the demand and the disparities were so great that you really needed solutions that scaled. Well, that's something I knew how to do. So beginning to tell the story of a workforce that if you can train so many more people and reach more people, you will have a globally competitive workforce. Now, all of a sudden, businesses cared, governments cared, and I was able to leverage that to the White House, and I became a White House commissioner. And I was actually one of the few that was able to change federal policy.
No, it's really, I kept encouraging people. I was listening to them talk and I'm like, guys, wait a second. Somebody who works in Washington, you've scheduled really complex day-to-day schedules of different cabinet secretaries. You can be a project manager. Those are transferable skills. So I'm so happy to hear you give them specific examples, as we know that people feel a little hesitant. And the reality is I love change. And I know you love change too. And so how do we help empower these folks to love it as much as we do and understand that it can really break through for them?
Yes, and it's so important to remember what is relevant and why it matters. And then you'll find that audience who will support that change.
Yeah, absolutely. And you find the bosses that appreciate the unique perspective that you bring and don't have the not created here attitude, which I've always found to be, the types of folks I wanted to work for. And something that we try to do at FAIR is we try to bring in people from so many different industries, and it makes a huge difference. As we wrap up today, we always ask our guest 3 big questions. And so I'm going to look at my questions. What woman or women inspired you to break through?
It's actually a woman in history, Florence Nightingale. Partly because where I grew up in a small town at the time, there weren't a lot of female role models. And so I got my role models from the library, and Florence Nightingale, she created the modern medical triage system, and she used data. Even though she was a nurse, she used data and analytics. And as a result, she became the first woman included in the Royal Statistical Society. And as I mentioned, her triage methods are still used to this day. So she definitely was a change agent, and I really admired Florence Nightingale.
A great model to follow after, and it's always why it's important for us to study history. So we go to question number 2. What are you going to do to inspire the next generation of female leaders now that you've left Girl Scouts and you're a corporate director and you're consulting and doing other things in life?
One of the things that I have found is my book, Path to the Stars, is really relevant right now to kids. I have found both boys and girls really going after that book and reading it and reaching out to me. It's really been amazing to me. But I think it's the stories of overcoming so many obstacles and that persistence and resilience, and how do you go after your dreams. It's really relating to so many kids, especially after what we've been going through in the pandemic. So one of the things that I've been doing is really reaching out to more schools as they're coming back to help them see that the lessons in Path to the Stars can really help their students make a difference. And, just last week, I spoke to 500 girls at a girls' middle school in Palo Alto, and the type of impact it made really made me feel good. But what made more of a lasting impression is the impact it's going to have on their lives and the hope that it has provided them, that they can create the life of their dreams, even though there's tremendous amounts of challenges right now. The other thing I'm doing is working with the Stanford Women on Boards, and working to try to figure out how to get more women on boards, especially around things like cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, in terms of our privacy being tracked, women are really at a disadvantage in the way the world has been created digitally. And it's something that I'm incredibly passionate about. That like button on Facebook has been linked to the increase in children's suicide, especially girls. It's gone up 28%. And, there wasn't studies or forethought, and that wasn't something that they considered. And I just think that we need to be much more thoughtful about the technology and the interface, especially how it relates to children and women.
Well, it's really heart-wrenching when you put forward that statistic. And I do think that giving guidance and really being hands-on during the digital age helps young people understand and listen to somebody else that's gone through things not exactly like they have. But I know having an opportunity to listen to you speak to that class had to be something that really resonated with those children. And I know that even I can look back on, 50 some odd years being in elementary school and having that speaker come and thinking, I want to do that. I want to be like her. So I'm so glad that you continue to do those types of forums. Last question. People are re-entering the workforce. Young women are re-entering the workforce. Older women might have stepped away, because of what was going on, taking care of their kids during the pandemic. It's going to be tough for women. We know how many women have dropped out of the workforce. And so what would you say to inspire women that are newly entrants or people that had to step away and now are going back?
So one of the first things is, when you want to create your life, is don't just react. Really take a moment and a beat and to think about what it is you want. Don't just try to go back to what was. We all have an opportunity, and don't lose this opportunity to reimagine. Reimagine what your work could be like. Reimagine what your engagement could be like. And then when you decide what it is you want to do, really own that. Because the first person you're going to have to convince about a different work situation or the different job that you want, maybe you want a promotion out of this, the first person you have to convince isn't your boss, it's yourself. Yeah. And once you've convinced yourself, then there's nothing that can stop you. So what I would really recommend is really don't just react and say, okay, I'm going back to work. Take a beat. Think about, how do you want to create your life now? And then just be dogged and persistent to create the life that you want.
That's fantastic. And that's the thing about breakthroughs. Breakthroughs are breakthroughs that you may have in the workplace, but guess what? They're also breakthroughs that you experience as an individual when you redesign how you're going to perceive your path forward. So I love that is our ending comment. Thank you everybody for joining us. This is Breakthrough with Lisa Gable, and we hope you come back.